All right, welcome to our explainer. Today we're looking at County Louth in Ireland. Now, a cancelled parade, a few very different court cases, and a really tragic accident. On the surface, they might seem totally unconnected. But we're going to connect the dots and see what these events tell us about the trust, or lack thereof, between a community and the institutions that are supposed to serve it.
So our story kicks off with just a single number, 60,000 euros. Look, it might not sound like a life-changing amount of money, but this specific figure, it represents a pretty deep crack in a town's identity and a tradition that's just been stopped in its tracks.
And what we're talking about here is Dundalk's St. Patrick's Day Parade. You know, for years, this was the event. The streets were just packed with people, music, celebration. It was vibrant. But this year, silence. Those streets are going to be empty. And that 60,000 euro hole in the funding is exactly why.
So what actually happens when a town's vibrant heartbeat, which is how one organizer described it, just stops beating? This is way more than just a missed party. The cancellation has left a lot of people feeling a sense of, well, civic abandonment. It's making them ask some really tough questions about who's in charge.
And the fallout just ripples out from there. For local shops and pubs, it's a huge economic blow. This is their biggest day of the year, gone. There's also this real fear that if you lose a tradition like this, even for 1 year, you might never get it back. The whole thing just cascades, and it all comes back to that funding gap, leaving the community looking at its leaders and wondering what happened.
Now, this whole question of trust in institutions, it doesn't just stop at the town hall. It goes right into the courthouse, where we see a totally different kind of test. We're going to look at a couple of cases where, believe it or not, money seems to play a huge role in what justice actually looks like.
Okay, so check this out. We've got two completely different paths through the courts here. In one case, you've got a guy who commits a pretty vicious assault. He literally bites another man's face. He pays 3,000 euros in compensation and walks away with a fully suspended sentence. No jail time. Then, you have an unlicensed broker who stole tens of thousands from people. He's way behind on paying it back, so he's the one actually facing having his suspended sentence activated.
And you can just feel the frustration in this quote. It's from the prosecution in the Jimmy Comiskey case. I mean, for 6 whole years, the victims have been waiting for their money. The defense is saying, hey, a house is being sold, the money's coming, but the state is just seeing a pattern of delay after delay. It's this high-stakes game of promises versus payments.
So what's really going on here? It seems like the court is using the threat of prison as leverage, as a tool. The suspended sentence becomes this sword hanging over someone's head to make them pay up. You could say it's a practical way to get victims their money back, but man, it really raises a big question, doesn't it? Does justice look one way if you can pay and another way if you can't?
But money can't fix everything, can it? What happens when the damage can't be measured in euros at all? Let's turn to some cases where the harm is so personal, so deep, that no amount of cash could ever make things right.
Just listen to these words. I was in a place where I should have been safe. That's a quote from a 74-year-old woman. She was a patient in a hospital, Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, a place you go to heal. But for her, it became the site of a horrifying violation when she and 2 other people were sexually assaulted. I mean, this case is just a total gut punch to a community's sense of security. The fact that the attacker had a prior conviction for rape and targeted some of the most vulnerable people imaginable in a hospital is just shocking. He was extradited from Germany, which shows how seriously this is being taken. But the attack itself, it leaves this permanent scar on the public's trust in the places we need to believe are safe. And that feeling of safety being completely shattered, well, it happened in a totally different way for a Garda officer during what should have been a pretty standard traffic stop. Her story shows how trauma isn't always about the physical injury. Sometimes it strikes at the one place you should feel the most secure. It was that one sentence, that one threat, that did the real damage. Okay, getting hit in the face is bad enough, but the threat to find her home and burn it down, that's a different level of terror. It turned her sanctuary into a source of constant fear. The psychological damage was so bad that she didn't just retire from her career, she felt she had to leave Ireland entirely. A court can punish a crime, sure, but it can't just undo that kind of life-destroying trauma. So for any system of justice to really have the trust of the community, it has to be applied fairly to everyone. And that means everyone, including the people who are part of the system itself. They have to be held accountable too. And that very idea, accountability, is now front and center in an incredibly tragic case that has just sent shockwaves through the community. Because this one involves a suspended member of the Gardaí. You know, the wheels of justice can turn pretty slowly.
It was on St. Patrick's Day 2024 that a beloved GAA coach, Neil McEnany, was killed in a hit-and-run. Now, a suspended Garda, Michael Ball, has pleaded guilty. The final sentencing hasn't happened yet, but that guilty plea is a huge step towards some kind of legal closure for a family that's grieving and for a community that's been watching very, very closely.
And in the middle of all of the legal proceedings, the judge said this, directly to Niall McEnany's family in the courtroom: "You shouldn't have to be here." It's one of those rare moments where you see the human side of the justice system, a simple acknowledgement of the unbelievable suffering that this family has been forced to go through. It just reminds you of the real people at the heart of every single case.
So, a canceled parade, justice that seems to have a price tag, trauma that can't be fixed with money, and a protector who is now facing judgment. What is the one thing that connects all of these different stories?
It all comes down to trust, doesn't it? Every single one of these stories is a test of that trust. Trust in your local government to keep traditions alive. Trust in the justice system to be fair, no matter if the crime is about money or violence. Trust that our hospitals are safe havens. And, maybe most importantly, trust that the system will hold absolutely everyone accountable for what they do.
And that really is the fundamental question hanging over County Louth right now. It connects the silence on the streets on St. Patrick's Day to the verdicts being handed down in the courtrooms. It makes us think beyond just the cost of a crime or the price of a parade, and really ask about the true value of a community's faith in itself. And when that faith gets broken, what on earth does it take to rebuild it?